Shooting from the hip, boys. Here we go. All the artifacts received, dug up from the cut. We're gonna have Doc explain this stuff. Just get everyone a good view. It's pretty quiet here because we're in the library.
Yeah, you talking to me.
Yeah, a little bit. Some of the oldest piece of Irish nationalism right there. A little setup. Some of our merchandise. And my favorite, the beer. All these artifacts. And we pop right over here to Doc.
So what we have in here is the Duffy's Cut Museum at Immaculatus Gabriel Library. And some pretty rare artifacts in here. Everything in here comes from Duffy's Cut. Some things that are relating to the camp, work life. Got buttons here that were obviously on shirts at one time. Some pewter buttons that would have been a part of a haversack. A knife, Barlow knife that would have been in the right pocket of one of the men. Guy was stuck under the tree. It came from him. Those pewter buttons did too. We have a pants clasp here that belonged to John Ruddy.
Who's John Ruddy, Doc?
John Ruddy's the first man who we found, and the youngest at 18 years old from Donegal. His body went back to Donegal to be buried at Ardra in St. Patrick's Church in a plot that was given to us by Vince Gallagher, founder of the Commodore Barry Club. And there's also a shoe buckle of his that's down at the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Other objects from the camp. But over here we have some coffin nails on the top. The idea of putting these out here is to show the relative deterioration of some of these coffins that were under a tree. There are actually 4 skeletons that were under a tree, and the roots dug right through them. One guy was actually completely entwined in those roots, and that's the guy we have the knife and the pewter buttons from. But the coffins in here were not as well preserved. John Ruddy's coffin was pretty well preserved. These are just representative nails. We have a lot more of them in the office. But John Ruddy's coffin, comparative to the others, comparable to the others, we even got wood from them. The nails are bigger, old coffin wood on there. And the lower segments here in this cabinet have to do with the railroad. So we have stone spikes from the first early days of the railroad, very experimental. They were used to hold the tracks to the ground, and the tracks went into the ground with these spikes on stone blocks called sleepers or sills. And those sleepers are what the current stone monument at Duffy's Cut is made from. And they're really rare. There were supposedly only illustrations of these that still, told their story, but we found a whole bunch of them. And then the track piece here, Morris and Essex type track, imported from the UK from the 1830s. This is one of only a few pieces known to still exist in the world, because usually they melted those down to make the more modern T-rail by the mid-1830s. This was right out of Duffy's Cut. Went upside down over a block of wood, and the train ran over that. Some other things like the rope and pulley method to lower those stone blocks into place that the tracks were attached to. That's the actual hook that would have lowered them, and then that's the looped implement that would have lowered with the rope, block in place. Over here we have a whole bunch of old Irish pipes. Matt pointed out the Aaron Gobrow pipe bowl, which has been described as the oldest example of Irish nationalism in North America. something found from 1832 from the work crew with the Aaron Gobrow flag, and it says Flag of Ireland on it. Context, very important for the story of Duffy's Cut. And then the stem here that has the city of Derry stamped on it, very important for the context as well. That's the ship, the port of departure, the John Stamp left from there that brought our men over here. And the only city that's on any of these pipe stems. You have some manufacturers on some of the other stems, but you don't actually have the city. This is the only one that does. Behind that is some examples of the fire that existed. The camp was destroyed on orders of Duffy by the blacksmith. We have that in the sources. And so we have evidence here of that fire and the pewter that melted onto those pipe stems. A lot of other interesting designs in these stems and shapes. These would have been in the hands of our men.
What were the stems made of? Stems made of.
Yeah, this is all clay. So this would have been, of a type or design that a particular manufacturer, thought would be sellable. And so the guys would have gotten this either when they went on the ship or when they got off the ship. And a kind of standard gear for these guys. I mean, everybody smoked pipes in those days. This wasn't like, something that was unusual for a bunch of workers. And we have, if you look at the number of stems and the number of bowls, a good number of those guys would have had those with them. The pot on the bottom here actually was the first artifact we found. That was back in 2004, I think it was, where there was a depression in the soil. There was an archaeologist from Antietam Battlefield who told us, look for depressions rather than mounds. And so we found a very interesting depression there. And on a very interesting day, Earl Schandelmeyer reached in and grabbed that pot, brought it out. And kind of beginning of the archaeology, so we weren't, we didn't even have an idea of what might be down there yet. But that was way back in '04. And then the ladle there went very close to this in the ground. So this was buried actually with a bunch of charcoal beneath it, and you could see the remnants of the charcoal and what it would have been used for. And it's interesting because it shows that this was covered up very quickly. And the reason why it was covered up very quickly is because they were fleeing from the site. The blacksmith would have buried those guys, gotten the heck out of there, and basically left it, like it was under the surface of the soil. There's a medicine bottle down here that was buried basically intact, upright, right in the middle of the shanty area in the fill where we found most of the artifacts, a 30 by 30 burn field. Then that bottle was right down there, right in the middle of it all. The miscellaneous pottery, some of this dates from the earlier period, some of it dates from a slightly later period. This bottle here for a beverage would have been from around 1870 or so, around the time that the crew was in there working to expand the track line under Patrick Doyle, and he's the guy who found the skeletons for the first time, and then our geologist believes moved the bulk of them to where they are under the stone monument today. So that's evidence of Patrick Doyle. But yeah, this is all very, very unique stuff, very important in Irish American history. The idea that this stuff in most cases is just sort of plowed over when a new track line goes in or the track line expands. And because the track line expanded to the north, it left behind a very rare glimpse into the Irish railroading workers from 1832.
All right, Doc. So what do you think people are wondering if they want to learn more about this? What's our next step?
Well, the story is only partially completed, of course. We have 50 more skeletons down there. We're going to continue our archaeological work both at Duffy's Cut and at Northwood Cemetery, where there's a potter's field containing another railroader crew infected by one of the men of Duffy's Cut who ran west and infected that crew. And in fact, we're going to start first at Northwood and then swing back to the Cut later this year. This is going to be a good year. 2020 sounds like a good year for Duffy's Cut. The paintings over here by Fred Danziger are actually, we think, a pretty good representation of what happened to the men at the time, the murders. And the idea that they were essentially martyrs, killed by nativists who resented them being in their midst. They didn't want the Catholics there, they didn't want the Irish there. And the first 7 absolutely were murdered. There's no question about that. So we expect that when we get to the rest of them, we're going to find evidence of murder for others as well.
All right, how can people help out? Because I know we're trying to get some DNA done.
Yeah, I mean, any donations here help because the cost of the DNA extraction from the old teeth is the big cost. The modern DNA to compare it to is relatively inexpensive, but it's at least $1,000 a sample, if not more, for the old DNA to be extracted from old teeth. We have teeth from each of the 7 individuals we excavated from 2009 to 2012, and we can start with that. I mean, when we get to the rest under the stone monument, we'll deal with that when we get there. But we got 7 individuals whose family trees are incomplete. People in Ireland would be interested to know what happened to their ancestors, 180 some years ago, 190 years ago. So, this should be the year when all that begins.
All right, where would they need to go if they wanted to donate?
Yeah,
Or
HTTP duffyscut.immaculata.edu. There's a website at Immaculata that is the Duffy's Cut website, and we accept donations, and you can write it off on your taxes because we are a registered 501c3 nonprofit educational organization with the IRS and with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's a worthy cause. If you're interested in the fate of the Irishman who died at Duffy's Cut, please help us out.